hit the camera. What that bushing right there looks like, and then compare that, keep hitting the camera, with that one. I wanted to go over some Browning Hi-powers today because I was researching them the other day. Let me put it this way, I was in the market for one the other day and I wanted an original, an FN Belgium-made Browning Hi-power. That middle gun is the one that I ended up getting, but when I was looking for these, I wanted to know a little bit more information about the gun in general. I did a lot of research. I found that they were produced from 1935 to 2018. And then just this year in 2022, they have started making another Browning Hi-power. In 1940, Belgium was occupied by German forces, and they produced the Hi-power pistol as well, and it was designated as a 640B. At the same time, Allied forces were also producing the Belgian Hi-power. Well, you can't call it Belgium then, because what they did is they moved the production to Canada, and you get what's called an Inglis Hi-power, and it will look a lot like this right here. This one is marked number 2, MK1, with an asterisk right behind the 1. The number 1s were made for China, the Chinese nationalists, and they had adjustable sights and a slot for a wooden stock holster type thing. One thing I found in my research is anything that was listed as a Thumbprint Hi-power was going for a lot of money, even if they were in not that great condition. So to give you an idea, this right here, this little cutout, is what they are referring to as a thumbprint. In researching that, I found that the thumbprint on the original design was removed in 1959, 1960 range, and anything pre-1960 is probably going to be considered a thumbprint model, or you can say any thumbprint is a pre-60 made gun. Another thing with the originals, and I'll have to show it with this one here and this one. Sorry about that, beat my guns up. All right, this one has an internal extractor. It's nice and smooth. You can see that little part right there. Well, that's the internal extractor. This one has an external, and you can see it right here. This one too has an external extractor. The internal extractor guns were made all the way up until 1962. So anything with an internal can be considered pre-62, we'll put it that way. And one thing that I found in my research is that these older models, they're what you would call more fragile due to a couple of things. One is their parts availability is limited, and if you break a part, you're going to be screwed. You might be able to round something up or get you another gun. But the other thing is that they had softer forgings, and you don't want to shoot any plus P or plus P plus in those because they just weren't made for that type of pressure. Then I ran into another thing regarding the serial numbers, and that's the T series. The T series came out right at 1962 and coincides with the first external extractor. It was also a new serial number format. Right after that, the C series came out. So it would be some numbers and then the letter C, and it's usually about 3 numbers in the letter C. And it was the same with the T series. And the C series usually started around 1970. With the C series, the date of production was introduced. So the first 2 numbers following the C are the year of production. So it could be 245 C76, and that would be the year. I don't know if I mentioned it, but the C series started around 1970. And also in my research, I found out some other stuff regarding the hammers. Now, you'll notice that all 3 of these guns have ring hammers. That's because I'm partial to ring hammers. I like the ring hammer. The other hammer was the spur hammer. Well, the ring hammer was the original. That's why you see this on this older gun. And even this one would have been a spur hammer, but it's been replaced, obviously. So the spur hammer replaced the ring hammer about 1971. And this is not a pre-71 model. That is it was an 85. That's what that is. So also, you started getting a 2-letter date code on the serial numbers. In 1975, the C-Series naming convention is replaced by a machine-engraved 2-letter date code system. The first 3 numbers are the model number, and then the 2 letters are date codes. And for instance, I mentioned this was an 85. If you can see, get it in focus, that says 245P as in Paul, V as in Victor. So the alphanumeric code basically boils down to this: Z as in zebra equals 1, Y equals 2, X equals 3, W equals 4, V equals 5, T equals 6, R equals 7, P equals 8, N equals 9, and M equals 0. So that one was P as in Paul and V as in Victor. P is an 8, and V is a 5. So that's an 85 model. And we can do the same thing with this practical here. See if I can get this to focus. NY, 245 NY. So an N equals a 9 and the Y equals 2. So that's a 92 model. Anything pre-1981 was a Mark 1. And in 81, the Mark 2 was introduced. So this is a Mark 2 for sure. And it should have a spur hammer, but it does not. So I take it was replaced. One thing that distinguishes the Mark II, well, there's a couple of things that distinguish the Mark II. They have what's called a hognose bushing that protrudes from the front of the frame. And if you'll notice on this, hit the camera, what that bushing right there looks like. And then compare that, keep hitting the camera, with that one, or even this one. So that's one item. The other is that I found is, I don't know if you'll be able to see this or not, but there's a rib right along the top edge here that runs all the way down the length of the gun. That was distinctive on Mark IIs. So if you get one and the upper slide has that rib on it, you're pretty much guaranteed that will be a Mark II model. if you notice on this one, which is not a Mark II, this is a Mark III, the rib's gone. My notes here state that the finishes on the Mark II pistol were parkerized, with some being either dark gray, nearly black, or dark green. The grips were changed to a black checkered nylon versus the traditional French walnut. You'll notice that a lot of the pre-Mark IIs, they have a grip style like this, except that they're wood. An internal change was the feed ramp was altered on the Mark II. The humped feed ramp found on the earlier guns was removed and the ramp was throated. And it states that the Mark IIs are still forged frame pistols, and the mainspring was changed to 32 pounds from a 26 to 28 pound in the late 70s, so all Mark IIs have the heavier mainspring. Now the Mark III, like the practical up at the top, this one here, this is a Mark III version. Those started around 1987, 1988, and they ran all the way up until the end of production in 2018. With those, FN moved to a cast frame. The finish on the standard gun is an epoxy, which is a pretty solid finish, but blue models were still available. The two-tone practical is also introduced in both fixed and adjustable sight models. All these guns have firing pin block safeties. Both the front and rear sights are dovetailed, and the top rib of the Mark II is gone. So as you'll notice, there's a dovetail there, and those are dovetailed in. So your sights, and the no rib, of course. And compare that to the Mark II, where you have it looks like machined into the frame, or the upper sights. Yeah, they're not dovetailed. So anyway, that was some of the information that I found about these three guns, or guns in general. This one is an oddity. You would think that this is an Inglis made, Canadian made gun. Well, the note on that particular one, now I've researched this and I cannot find it, so anyone out there that may know this, let me know. It says post-war Canadian, MP number 2 Mark I. It says a Colonel Johnson special, made for 1950 field trials, and it says illegally. When it says illegally, what I'm thinking is this gun was used on the machining that made those early Inglis Hi-powers during the war, but it was made in 1980. The serial number does not match up with an Inglis serial number. It is, come on, focus, 5P6215. And I don't have the information on what the early Inglis serial numbers were, but I know it wasn't a P as in Paul. I wish I had written that down, but I don't have it. But anyway, I am 99% sure this was made in Canada, but I think it was made a lot later than World War II. I'll put it that way. So that's what I have on these Hi-powers. I'm not covering the brand new Hi-power that's out. They're kind of expensive. If I did not mention this, the early Thumbprint models are selling for over $1,000, and so is the new 2022 version of the FN Hi-power. Of course, you have clones out there that are being made, and they're pretty good. If you're just wanting a shooter that you can call a Hi-power, I think any of those would be good. Now this one right here, it is a surplus, an import, and I got it for $650. But then you add in tax and shipping and a transfer fee, it's right at $700. So if you're in the market for an original Hi-power, you might want to jump on anything that you find now because they're getting harder and harder to come by. But that's all I wanted to cover on these Hi-powers. Just some research that I did, and I was curious as to why this Mark II, which should have a spur hammer, had a ring hammer, and the only thing I can figure is that someone had replaced the hammer.